Trump, winner of the South Carolina primary. Mr. Trump, congratulations, and welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you very much, Chris.
With your big win in South Carolina, where do you think this race stands now? You have talked about running the table. Can you be stopped for the Republican nomination, or is this over?
Well, I guess you can always be stopped. I have very good competitors. They're very smart people, you know, governors, senators, very talented people. Ben Carson, Dr. Ben Carson, who's a tremendous guy and a talented guy. So, I mean, we have a lot of talented people.
Let me ask you, people are talking about this now as a three-man race, so let me ask you about your two chief competitors. Thumbnail sketches, lightning round rules, Ted Cruz.
Oh, he's very smart, very sharp. You know, I haven't been too happy with the way he's conducted himself, but I understand he wants to win, and it's a little bit tough. He did a couple of robocalls on me yesterday morning. That was the morning of the election. They were tough calls. I thought they were very unfair calls, but they were, you know, they were done. That's why I'm surprised I won by such a big margin. You know, when I entered this, Chris, I wasn't expected to win South Carolina. I was supposed to, you know, maybe not even think about winning it. That was like a number of months ago. And then all of a sudden I went there, I made one speech, and they fell in love with me, and I fell in love with them. Those people are incredible, by the way. They're incredible. We won't forget them.
All right, let's talk about Marco Rubio and his fitness to be president.
Yeah. Well, he's a talented guy. He's a good guy. I like him. We're going to have to see what happens. You know, I start off liking everybody, and then all of a sudden they become mortal enemies. So we'll see what happens. But he's been very respectful, very nice, and I hope to beat him.
You had quite a week in South Carolina. You got into something of a flap, which diminished, but you were in a flap for a while with the Holy Father. You went after George W. Bush. And while you won the primary handily by double digits, you did poorly among voters who decided in the last week. And I wonder if you think those flaps hurt you. Do you need to tone it down, do you think, as you become the front runner for the nomination, to act more presidential?
Well, probably I do. I mean, I can act as presidential as anybody that's ever been president, other than the great Abraham Lincoln. I thought he was pretty hard to beat.
So when are you going to start?
I can act, well, pretty soon. But, you know, don't forget, we started off with 17 people. I've been hit from, you know, 97 different angles. And now we're down to, I guess, 5. And we'll see what happens. But I think, yeah, I think I'll be very presidential at the appropriate time. Right now, I'm fighting for my life. I was fighting against a tremendous amount of very talented, very tough people. And I didn't really have time to think about it. I mean, I had to be tough, and I had to be smart, and I had to be sharp, and that's okay, too.
You took some strong positions this last week that you later had to walk back, and I'd like to explore a couple of them. First, you said that President Bush 43 lied us into war in Iraq and took that back. Here it is.
They lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none.
You would not say again that George W. Bush lied?
I don't know. I can't tell you. I mean, I'd have to look at some documents.
And here you are on whether or not you support the Obamacare mandate that all individuals must have health insurance. Here that is.
Well, I like the mandate. Okay, so here's where I'm a little bit different. I don't want people dying on the streets.
I'm the most conservative person in the world with getting rid of Obamacare.
Mr. Trump, question. Do you support the individual mandate in Obamacare or not?
Right. Let me explain to you. First of all, I don't want mandates for anything. I want people to get, but I don't want people dying in the streets. And I was actually talking over Anderson Cooper, who I thought it was a great interview, and he's a great interviewer. But I was talking over him. He was talking at the same time. He mentioned the word mandate, and I was talking about something else, to be honest with you. It doesn't matter. It's not a very complicated
situation. Wait, you said I like the mandate.
I want people to be covered that cannot afford to be covered, that are. I don't want people dying in the streets. And that's not mandate. That's me. That's having a heart. I don't want people dying in the streets. I don't want people that have no health care whatsoever, and they're in the middle of a street dying. And I talk about it all the time. And you know what? When I give these speeches where I have 10,000 and 15 and 20,000 people, and I talk as a Republican, as a conservative Republican, and I talk about that, and I say, I don't want people dying because they have no money. I get standing ovations. You know, the Republicans are not bad people. I get standing ovations. So I think it's very important. I'm not going to have people dying in the street if I'm president. I can tell you that. You can call it whatever you want.
But to the larger point, I mean, whether it was lying or whether it was the mandate, particularly now that there's going to be more and more focus on everything you say, do you think you have to be more careful?
Well, you know, that was a case where Anderson, and I don't blame him at all, but we were talking at the same time. In the case of the war in Iraq was a disaster. And by the way, I was against it at the beginning, and Joe Scarborough can show you that because fortunately he found a clip. But the fact that I said they had a successful military operation, maybe it might have been successful as an opening operation, but I was opposed to the war. The war in Iraq was a disaster, okay? It may have been the worst decision ever made by our country, okay? That's how bad it was.
But, sir, respectfully, I mean, that wasn't the issue. The issue was whether or not we were lied into war. I don't necessarily even want to read.
Well, right now, that's for other people to determine. I don't say yes or no. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm saying let somebody else determine it. I can just tell you the war in Iraq cost us $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We got absolutely nothing. We have wounded warriors who I love all over the place. We got absolutely nothing out of it, Chris. And now Iran is taking over Iraq. We handed it to them on a silver platter, and they're going to take over far more than Iraq, unless I'm president, of course. Look, the war in Iraq was a disaster. And the reason I won by such a large number is that while the pundits, including yourself, thought I made a mistake when I took on Bush on that issue, and I have nothing against Bush. I don't even know the president. I never met him. But when I took on Bush on that issue, I never felt it was a bad thing to do because people that are smart know that the war in Iraq was a disaster. And even Jeb Bush in the end admitted that the war in Iraq was not a good thing.
New question, new subject. When are you going to release your tax returns?
Well, we're having them made. They're extremely complicated. It's going to take a little while. I don't know if you ever saw the picture I gave, but I gave you a picture with about 2.5 feet of tax returns standing in front of me as I was signing. They're having them done, and we'll do it at the appropriate time.
Well, reporters have been asking for months, and you keep saying the appropriate time. And, you know, I'm sure,
mine is not
let me
a
just say, you talk about your empire. I'm sure you have a ton of lawyers and a ton of accountants. Don't voters deserve to get a look at your finances, sir?
Oh, I think so. I've already given my financial statements more than anybody's ever given.
No, but the tax returns.
And they turned out to be about 5 times greater than anybody ever thought. No debt, very little debt, tremendous cash flow, some of the greatest assets in the world, which is the thinking that our country needs to get rid of its $19 trillion, et cetera, and to make good deals. But I've given the tax returns at the appropriate time. There's no rush. At the appropriate time.
To use a business term, are you involved in a hostile takeover of the Republican Party?
No, I'm not at all. I get along with the Republicans. There's nothing hostile about it. I was a Republican establishment figure, and then the day I decided to run, I became an outsider, and more so than I even thought. People that were totally establishment that loved me. You know, I was a very big contributor. I gave $350,000 just before to the Republican Governors Association.
But what's your view of what's your view of the GOP establishment now, sir?
I think it's a mess. I think it's a mess. And I think they better get their act together because they're going to keep losing elections. With the kind of thinking that we have with the Karl Roves and the Stephen Hayeses and these characters that can't get themselves arrested, if you want to keep people like that, if you want to keep listening to people like that, you're never going to win. You're never going to win. They're from a different age. They're from a different world.
You raised the question again this week of whether or not you're going to honor your pledge, the loyalty pledge that you signed to run as a Republican, and even if you lose, not to launch a third-party campaign. Is that a threat that you're going to keep wielding throughout this campaign?
No, because I want to run. It's asked by folks like you. You're bringing it up again as an example. No, the pledge is the pledge, but the other side is not honoring it. Look, I signed a pledge. I'm a Republican. I'm the leading Republican by a lot. And that's where I want to be. I don't want to run as an independent. I'm not going to be doing that. I think it's highly, highly unlikely. But I'm not being treated right. When we go to the debates, the room is stacked with donors and special interests. I'm self-funding my campaign. I'm putting up my money. I'm putting up millions and millions and millions of dollars, like throwing it out the window. So far, it's worked. So far, I'm also spending a lot less money than all these other people that are spending, you know, $100 million. And I'm leading by a lot, and they're losing by a lot. But I'm self-funding my campaign. I'm not controlled by special interests. I'm not controlled by donors. I'm not controlled by lobbyists, right? So I'm doing that. But the rooms are stacked. Every time I go to a debate, I walk in, it's like death. And when other people, I won't mention names, but when other people speak, they say something stupid and they get standing ovations. It's very unfair what the RNC is doing. They're stacking the room. And that's unfair, with donors and special interests and lobbyists, and that's unfair.
Are we going to see you at the Fox debate on March 3rd?
Yes, I expect to be there, sure.
Well, I look forward to seeing you, sir. Mr. Trump, thank you. Thanks for your time
Me
today.
too.
Safe travels on the campaign trail, sir.
Thank you very much.
Up next, we'll speak.